Okay, now we're going to build up our bracket. And once again, we are going to be using as much symmetry as we can. And the bracket in the picture in the book has one plane of symmetry. So we're just going to work off of that. So the first thing that we need to do is we're going to extrude the back piece. And so I'm going to do this right from the extrude base boss. So we're going to start right from there. We're going to do it here on the front plane. As I take a look at this, I'm just going to grab my rectangle tool. I'm going to make my rectangle. We're going to dimension it. So here we've got 6 inches. My computer is not wanting to keep up with me today. And so here we have 4 inches. So of course that is non-constrained because it can still float around. I mean, I can grab that and see that still in the dimensioning tool. Don't want to do that. But we can move this around. So how do we stop that? We're going to tie it to the origin. The book likes to use that X. I actually have always used center to the midpoint of a line. And that's just, doesn't really matter how you do it. Everybody's got their own thing. Okay, why is that not constrained? Because we need to put in our constraints. There's vertical. There's our horizontal. So these need to be construction lines though, because notice they're still solid. If they're still solid, they're going to cause us problems, make them construction, so they're not really there. Let me show you something. What happens if I go and add a dimension here? Notice it all went yellow. It went kind of crazy because we've over-constrained it. So SolidWorks goes, adding this will make it over-defined or unable to solve. I can make the dimension driven. What does that mean? That means that it is a reference dimension. It will put parentheses around it. So that's sometimes useful when you have a complex model and you're just trying to see what a gap is. But if you leave it driving, what's going to happen is it stays yellow. Sometimes it'll go to red depending on what's going on. Down here it tells you it's overdefined. So let's get rid of that and take it back to the nice happy black. So everything is nice and stable there. It's much like a Bob Ross painting, nice and calm, happy little trees. So what we're going to do is we're going to exit the sketch. And we're going to extrude it out. This is built off a 1/4 inch plate. Hello, computer, come on. There we go. So now we have our 1/4 inch plate. So now what we want to do is I need another plane that I can draw the horizontal part of the flange on, but it's not in the middle of the part. It's a little bit offset. So I'm going to need to make a new plane because I'm going to need a plane to sketch on. So what we're going to do is we're going to make some reference geometry. Gives us plenty of different references here. Well, I'm going to reference it off the top here, and then I want it to be at a distance. I want to flip it down though because I want it going that way, and I want to offset it 1.25 inches from the top. And so that gives me a little reference plane there. I can rename this plane if I want to. If I just go right click, I can go into the properties and rename it. I don't think we really need to rename this plane right now. But what I do want to do is I'm going to want to sketch on that plane. So let's go into sketch. I'm going to sketch on that plane there. And then I want to look down right on top of it because I'm going to draw stuff based off of it. Okay, and so what I'm going to need is I'm going to need a line and an arc. But the first thing I want to drop down is I want to put on a center line because I'm going to use my wonderful symmetry as part of this. So now I have my center line. Actually, what I'm going to do, since it's not, oops, I didn't mean to do that. I ended up drawing a second one. What I want to do is I just want to grab this point and drag it down a little bit. I've left that undefined because reference geometry, really don't need it. And I actually don't need to drag that down, but I am dragging it down just to give me a little bit more room for what I want to do. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is let's start sketching in the geometry that I'm going to need. And once the computer catches up for me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a line. I want to draw it against that edge. And it's not letting me do it right now. So what do I need to do? Well, I'm going to need, because I can grab the tangent edge here, I can grab the point, but I can't grab that front face. So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to sketch something that I can grab. So where I can grab it is right here where I have the intersection. And I can bring this over to a certain point, somewhere along there, and then I can bring it down. But that's not really going to give me what I want. So the question is, because I want it to come off this front face, how am I going to do that? So what I'm going to want to do is I'm going to want to zoom in here a little bit, get my line tool, and I'm going to keep going over here until I get the midpoint of that front face. So now I can bring it over to wherever we want to go. And since it's horizontal, it'll be along that thing. And now I've got that line where I want it. So I'm just going to bring it up here, and it doesn't matter where we drop it. We're just going to drop it there for now. So we're just kind of sketching it in, and we'll fix it here in a minute. So what I want to do is I do want to get a half circle in here. And so one way I can do this is I can go into my circle command and then to trim, but that's not the way that we're going to want to do things. Oops, accidentally started drawing a line. So what I want to do is I want to go into my arc command. And I have a couple different things here on arcs. Center point, which means you pick the center point and two edges, 3-point arc. I want to do what's called a tangent arc. Because where I start this, it will put in the tangency. So this arc's always going to be tangent to that line that we drew. And then I just want it to be coincident with that. And we'll fix all that in a minute. But now, see, there's a tangency there, which means that that line and that arc will only intersect at one point. Here's my center, and it's coincident with the outside, with that center line that we're going to use for symmetry. Okay. So now let's actually start putting our constraints in. And actually, before we put in constraints, we need to actually get this geometry on the other side. And so the way that we're going to do that is we're going to mirror the entities. It's the reason we drew the center line there. So if I click on mirror entities, it's going to ask me what to do. It's automatically selected the arc because I had that there. And let's also get that line. We want it to copy, which means that we want to keep both the original line and the new line. And then I'm going to have it mirror about the center axis. And so that drops it in, and there it is. And you'll notice that it dropped in a lot of symmetrical constraints. So it's going to stay symmetrical to the other side. So let's look at a couple things. Well, one is I don't want this double bump here. I actually want that to be a smooth end, one circle. So what I'm going to do is I want to take this point here and this point here. And actually I don't want to select the arcs. I'm trying to select the points themselves. And so what I want to do is I want to merge those points together, which will make them the same point. Now, another way you can do this is if you select, I'll give you the exact same thing will happen. As I select those two arcs, I can put in a concentric constraint. Concentric constraint means that they have the same center line. So it's the same thing as merging those 2 points together. And so now you notice, now I've got a nice little circle there at the end. It's tangent to both lines because they're symmetrical. So with that constraint, we have everything that we need. Now, one thing that I did not mirror, we'll put the dimensions in here in a second, is I did not mirror that initial line that I drew in. So how do we take care of that? I'm going to rebuild the sketch. I'll go back into the sketch. And actually, I was thinking that we were going to go into the mirror and change the mirror. I can't do that because we can do that in a 3-dimensional but the mirror just happened. So what we'll do is we'll just do a mirror again. I'm just going to mirror this line about here. And then I want to make sure that, yeah, so we're all fine. Notice now we've got the grayed in thing that tells us, oh, we have a completely closed in section. So what I'm going to do is I'm on the one side, I'm going to put in the radius, which is 0.75. I don't have to do it on the other side because they are concentric. I'm going to put a dimension in between these 2 points here, so the edges of my line, and that's going to be 5 inches. I did it that way just because since I had it as 2 lines, it did make 1 line, so if you wanted, you can. Sorry, I'm in the, I'm going to delete that. I mean, you can also just pick the whole line, and that's actually the better way to do it. Picking by points is typically not a good way to do things. You only pick points when you have to, like what we're going to do right here. We're going to put a dimension to the center point of our arc, and that's going to be 6 inches. Okay, so what we have there is everything's black. Everything's completely constrained, so that's all good. And so now we're done with that sketch. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to extrude that downward. I think I may reboot the computer after we make this feature. And so I'm going to extrude this sketch here that we had. I want to extrude it down, so I'm just going to grab the arrow to change the dimension. And we'll do it blind down 1/4 of an inch. We'll say done, and so there we go. So now we've got another piece of our bracket here. We'll continue this in the next video.